sheriff's job in this election coming up is probably the most crucial one coming in the past 50 years. Not only do you have to deal with all the local issues, but we also have to deal with the federal issues that are coming down. So that's where my question kind of lies is, right now going out west, we're losing a lot of land to the BLM, the IRS, and the EPA. So my question is what is your position on the federal encroachment of the BLM, the Bureau of Land Management, for those not familiar with it, the EPA, the IRS on private property? And part two is, if the feds violate Article 1, Section 8, Paragraph 17, which restricts the ability for them to own land, what will you do to protect our private property?
Talk about a trick question. That is one. And, well, no, I say that with all seriousness, and here's why. We're not attorneys. We're law enforcement officers. We're elected to enforce the law. We don't make laws. And so we have to defer. Like in my case, I have 2 staff attorneys. And when those issues come up, we first run it through, the legal ramifications. We have a movement in the United States today, and unfortunately, it fringes right on almost a sovereign citizen group, in that, they have elevated sheriffs, if you will, to a position where we all are, they expect us to be omnipotent, in that I will act independent of the law to make, decisions on. Nothing could be farther from the truth. We cannot do that in those circumstances. So the short answer to your question is we have to confer with the legal authorities. Now, when there is a clear violation of the law, meaning that, and I can tell you, I have staff attorneys that will tell me that, issues such as the Second Amendment come up all the time. I'm always asked the question, would you disarm lawful citizens? The answer is no. What occurred in New Orleans during Hurricane Katrina was clearly and totally illegal. That should have never happened. And for any sheriff to be engaged in that and involved with the disarming of law-abiding citizens was wrong. And that's when you do, as a sheriff, stand up and say, I will not enforce that order because it's unlawful. But rarely in those instances, those things come into play. It's rarely, if ever, that cut and dried. When you get into property and property rights, things such as eminent domain, etc., we're not attorneys. We don't make those decisions, and we must defer to the attorneys for that. I know that's probably not the answer that you want, but I'm not a legal scholar. I'm not a practicing attorney. I'm not about to show up on scene as a sheriff and make an immediate legal ruling when I don't have in front of me LexisNexis. Not only do I read the basic law first, but then I look for any recent changes throughout the court system. We also are law-abiding citizens, and while we are elected officials with extra powers in so many instances, we cannot abuse those powers. And so therefore, that's what we must do in those circumstances.
I agree, that's quite a tricky question, but it goes back to jurisdiction. As an Escambia County Sheriff's deputy, I have the ability to place people in jail for felony violations, criminal felony violations. If I have, and also serve warrants. I can serve city warrants, I can serve county warrants, I can serve DEA warrants. If there's a warrant issued by a magistrate, they supersede us. If we have a warrant, which means someone smarter in the legal field than us draws up an affidavit and charges you with a offense, it is your duty as a sheriff to serve those. And whether you like it or not, you swear to enforce the law, and that is part of it. I see that you disagree with that, or I feel that you disagree with that, but that's the role of the sheriff. And I will serve warrants. I'm not going out with 2 people arguing over a piece of property, and make a decision like that. No,
My question
I understand what your question, but a lot of your audience probably does not. Okay? But what your question involves is lawyers and judges making determinations, and then a finding being set forth and a warrant being drawn up. And that is part of the job of the sheriff, is to serve warrants.
I'm going to make my response very, very short. I believe in the Constitution of the United States. I took an oath the sheriff to enforce the Constitution and the laws of the state of Florida. That's exactly what I will do.
Wow, you sounded like this very same thing that I was going to say. Look, as law enforcement officers, we have been defenders of the Constitution ever since we were sworn. That is our duty. That is our responsibility to the citizens that we serve. And my consensus is that I am a great defender of the Constitution of the United States from the First Amendment on down. And we will continue to defend that Constitution. And we will defend due process of law. There's a difference between arbitrarily doing something and adhering to the due process of the law. And that's what my intent is, to serve you as your sheriff, to make sure each one of you as citizens of this county has the due process of the law, and that it is fair and equally administered across the board. Thank you.
The good news about your comment is that those things are normally handled by courts and not handled out on the side of the road in a 10-minute conversation. Part of that conversation generates from a case that happened out west where a man owns some farmland and he put a cattle pond on his farmland so that he could feed his cattle. And that pond was adjacent to a river. And the government felt like the minerals from that every time it rained were leaking into the river, and they tried to stop that. So we wound up in this huge court battle. I'm proud to say that based on the rule of law, eventually those folks won, and the government was chastised for what they did. Sometimes government gets out of control. That's why we have courts. Folks, I work for the government. We need smaller government. We do need less people working for the government. They need less authority over our lives. I have seen those things get out of control. Let me tell you that you've met police officers that had that attitude. And in positions of authority, it's not uncommon. It takes a strong leader to address those problems. So the very short answer that maybe you prefer I had started with, those things are most properly handled in a court of law. I can't tell you about judges in every jurisdiction in the country, but in the jurisdictions I have been, I have nothing but the utmost respect for the men and women that sit on our courts and decide issues like that. I would not for a second, as the sheriff, participate in allowing the government to illegally come and take something that belonged to you, whether it was a handgun or whether it was a farm pond or a piece of property. I do believe in the Constitution, and I have taken that oath to protect and defend the Constitution my entire life.